Wheat feeds the world. 2.5 billion people in 89 countries eat it as a staple part of their diet. So, after years of volatility, is wheat and other grain production back on track? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Think of what you've eaten in the last day or two and undoubtedly there's some sort of grain in there. These are the staple foodstuffs that nourish the world. So what are production levels like this year? And should we be worried?
This farm, 120 kilometers east of Warsaw, produces 3,000 tons of cereals a year. But still, the head of the family worries about the future.
I don't have a plan B. For the moment, we are taking things one step at a time and trying to do everything we can to make ends meet. But we're expecting lean years ahead and uncertainty.
Adam's bills for electricity and fertilizer have increased dramatically. He's also worried about competition from Russia and Ukraine. Expectations for grain production this year and next suggest that it's going to fall slightly from last year. While the war in Ukraine continues to be a factor, the biggest unknown is extreme weather events. In the UK, heavy rain and flooding is impacting the quality and yield of crops, with some root vegetables left rotting in the ground. Southern Europe and North Africa are experiencing record temperatures and drought, which is affecting harvests. Globally, extreme weather has pushed nearly 72 million people into food insecurity, while economic shocks affect 75 million people, and conflict has pushed 135 million to acute food insecurity. These are big geopolitical problems that underlie the global food system. But if nothing changes, the number of people who don't have access to regular meals will only increase.
Well, let's meet our guests. In Bucharest, we have Cezar Gheorghe. He is a grain trade analyst and founder of AGRIColumn. That's a consultancy for the agriculture industry. In London is Arnaud Petit. He is the executive director of the International Grain Council. And I'm delighted to say that here with me in the studio is Gerald Masila, executive director of the Eastern Africa Grain Council. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Gerald, I'll come to you first. You've been at a big conference in London this past week. What was the mood like? What was said?
Well, yes, I did get the opportunity to be one of the speakers at the this 2024 International Grain Council Conference here in London, and it was very well attended. We had people from all over the world attending. Very good topics that were put in place in terms of the role of grain trade in food security. Lots of concerns about all the recent challenges and shocks that have happened affecting global grain trade, from logistics to conflicts to weather challenges that have affected production. So really a lot of concern about all these challenges and how they are going to affect food trade going forward.
So all these leaders, they're worried?
Indeed, we're all concerned. They are all concerned. And there is that need to really address the issues and find solutions.
Cezar, I'll come to you. Give us your reading of the situation. Is there going to be a shortage this year?
Well, actually, looking at the USDA report that appeared yesterday evening, it somehow balanced the production from this year versus last year. Actually, we have a plus of 3 million tons overall. But the story is not ready yet, because we all know that the frost caused a lot of damages in Russia, and they are undergoing to evaluate them and to see how much this will affect the actual size of crop in Russia. But overall, USA looks good, Europe looks good, Romania looks good, of course. We foresee in South America, in Argentina, 21 million tons crop. Australia is still on the good mood after sowings, and they foresee also 29 million tons. So all in one, and Canada, of course, it's in the game. All the regions, apart Russia, have a very good perspective for this season.
Arnaud, give us your reading of the global grain situation then for the rest of 2024.
Yes, just to echo what Georgie said, so there is good news and bad news. The good news, there will not be a shortage of grain, for sure. For wheat, for maize, there will be a good forecast of supply. And also in terms of good news, that a country like in Sub-Saharan Africa have been able to replenish their stocks. So that means there is margin of maneuver also for countries which were under pressure in the last 2 years in terms of trade. Now they have more margin of maneuver. The bad news is, as Georgie said, that's right, in Russia, we have seen some weather event which is downgrading quickly the production in Russia. But we have seen also in EU. In EU, the worries is about excess of water, but also the lack of luminosity of sun for having a very good quality of grains. And the last, I would say, uncertainties for the global market is India. Might India be a net importer of wheat? That means 3-4 million tons more demand coming on the market. That something can also make more pressure in a medium term. This is why I would say today, if all the policymakers and traders are looking on wheat and the volatility which is linked to these uncertainties.
Well, some argue that the wheat shortage is in fact a myth. According to the World Bank, predictions of global shortages of wheat and other foods did not materialise following Russia's war in Ukraine. By the end of 2022, wheat prices had in fact returned to pre-war levels. Take a look at this graph illustrating this, produced by the International Grains Council. However, the World Bank does say that wheat shipments to West Africa were slightly disrupted by the conflict. Gerald, just give us your reading of how reliant, as a continent, Africa is on grain that's coming from Europe, in particular Ukraine.
Yeah, very, very reliant. The whole Africa continent is relying very much on imports from outside the continent, mainly coming from Black Sea, both from Ukraine and also from Russia and those countries around there. And so when you look at crops, grains like wheat, Africa is importing, if you take out South Africa, it's importing over 90-95% of their consumption for wheat, and even rice and maize also to some extent, much great extent. So there is a very, very heavy dependence on imports from outside Africa continent, sure.
Are you concerned about Russia supplying wheat to Western African nations and getting a foothold, with the Sahel region in particular, that Russia's coming in and offering them cheaper grain in return for whatever influence it can receive?
I think we're seeing a lot of that, maneuver happening. And obviously from a trade perspective, it is an issue of concern when pricing is not based on, demand and supply forces, but other considerations and relations, and sort of like some people have mentioned, the whole idea of weaponizing food or using food as something to twist or to, open up favors and things like that. It's an issue because then you don't get the real value of that, and it's a major distortion when you look at trade from a trade perspective.
Good point. Cezar, just give us your view on the Ukrainian situation, what their harvest is going to look like this year, and can they get it out to where it needs to go?
Well, actually, Ukraine it's in a very good position speaking about trade. I speak right now, first of all, about the dimension of the crop that we realized that is decreasing with 1.5 million ton from 21 to 19.5. But I would like to emphasize on the fact that most of the goods, according to the fact that European Union still didn't input taxes, just flow to the European Union. 8.5 million tons of wheat coming to European Union last season instead of going to the countries that need this wheat, because it's much easier for Ukrainian flows to, let's say, dispatch fast in the vicinity and get rid of the goods very fast. Also, I must say that right now in Odessa, they ship very good in this moment. Of course, they have some war primes on the insurance for the vessels, but all in one, the flows are continuous without any bottlenecks or problem. The problem right now it's in Russia, if you allow me to say, because Russia themselves put a price floor, $265 or $270, and the export is controlled by Kremlin, and they did not want to, let's say, to let the exporters going under this price floor. We saw this in the last two tenders in Egypt. Romania sell roughly 360,000 tons of wheat, and none of the quantities were bought by Russia, even a kernel.
Arnaud, let's talk about climate change. This is obviously a huge issue. We've seen very heavy rains in countries from England to France and Germany, and then we've seen drought in Morocco and Australia. The climate is making life far more difficult for farmers everywhere.
Indeed, you're right. So we have seen an extreme situation, and even as I just said about India also having very high temperatures, 50 degrees. For wheat, it's something that is very difficult to cope with. So this is why the climate change or extreme weather events have an impact on the grain sector. But I would say if we look on the last 10 years, we have always seen supply going up. That means there is always a possibility for farmers to adapt to these new conditions. And what we discussed during the conference is particularly digitization of the grain value chain would help all the stakeholders, the farmers, but also traders and the shipping sector to be more efficient and to adapt quickly to new weather situation. We have seen now maybe we might have a La Nina event in Australia for the second part of the year, which means more drought in Australia, but better production in Argentina. So that's a situation when we have to face. And the last point I would like to highlight to climate change, that means we need also improvement in seeds. That means to varieties which are able to face this situation, drought and sometimes even excess of water in the same cropping system. So this is why we feel that there is also a need in investment to have varieties which can be more tolerant to that event.
So Arnaud, just on that point, are we talking genetic engineering here of the seeds to make them more resilient to climate change?
Indeed, when we are trying to tackle this type of issues like to be more resistant to climate events and to keep a high level of nutrients for the production, that means you have to have a technique which allow you to breed various genes at the same time. And the best way is to talk about the new breeding techniques, which is very promising to have new varieties in a short period of time. In classical breeding, to handle an issue of climate change, it takes more or less 15 years for wheat, because you have a really long period of time to do the test.
So Arnaud, this used to be the stuff of science fiction. It's now very much going to become food fact.
Indeed, I would say new breeding techniques has been used mainly on vegetable production. And now we see for varieties like wheat, which is more complex to cross and to select, this technique help a lot and reduce really the time of selection. So it's not just to play with the genes, but it's really to try to get the expression of what the wheat genomic is containing. And I think it's very important to work on this, because the risk is, as you said, and Gerald also said, Africa is very reliant on wheat. Asia now is 50% of the consumption of wheat is in Asia, but it's not the area of production. So therefore, we need really to handle this issue of having varieties, bringing nutrients food, but also resistant to this climate event in order to secure food security into our global food system.
Thanks, Arnaud. Gerald, you're originally from Kenya. Talk to me about the climate changes you've seen and how they're affecting farmers, not just in Kenya, but across Africa.
Yeah, we've also had our share of the effects of climate change. Just a couple of weeks back, we've had very, very abnormal rains with many parts of Kenya flooding. I believe you must have seen it in the media.
All over the news.
Where the whole country, many parts of the country, there were huge, floods we've never seen, in our lifetimes. and with damage, to roads, to bridges, farmlands being fully, flooded and crops swept away. So that has been quite significant. Currently, there is an assessment ongoing, to just see how much has that damage from the floods been, because it also came when we were just starting to do seeding in the main grain baskets of the region. And so that is yet to be determined to know to what extent all that flood will affect food security, but for sure it would. Now, the flip side of it is that whereas in the northern Eastern Africa part, Kenya and those other areas, we had floods, going a little bit south in Malawi and Zambia, we've had a serious drought. So there's the flip opposite of it. So at the moment now, already the government of Zambia already issued the alert in terms of the shortage, and they've already opened the markets, and they're looking to source between 1.8 to 2 million metric tons of maize to bridge the gap in the immediate as of now. Luckily, we had very good harvest in Tanzania and in Uganda, and so the cross-border modalities have all been agreed upon, and we've already now started engaging with our members who are looking to, get supplies across the border from Tanzania, from Uganda to Zambia and to Malawi, and we are addressing some of the, policy issues to do with the cross-border trade and regulations and all that, to make sure that the whole process is as smooth as possible and that costs don't really build up, although we have logistics challenges moving grain across the land.
Those new seeds that Arnaud mentioned, do you think Kenyan farmers will be on board for that?
Definitely, they are looking to look at all those options, and it's something that any modern farmer who is serious, you got to look at all these potential benefits that are coming from the new breeding techniques, being able to bring the water insect resistance, weeds resistance, and increasing output and dealing with the shortage of rain. All those conditions, characteristics that you want in your crop is something definitely farmers will be looking at. And the only issue at the moment is that there's a regulatory barrier in that Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda and a lot of those countries have not yet allowed GM, genetically modified seeds, and even other breeding techniques. The conversation is still quite an issue from a regulatory perspective and other kind of stakeholder pushbacks.
Thanks, Gerald. Cezar, give us your take on climate change and the damage it can inflict on the global grain trade.
Well, actually, it's no doubt that we have the climate change, and honestly, we can blame everybody. And as the European Union did on the farmers, they demonize the farmers. But all in one, I underline what Arnaud said about the NGT varieties of wheat. That in one single sentence, it will be like a fast runner on the same distance at the end of the day. And I strongly assume that in the future, the digitalization, the new technologies, the utilization of drones on the field will reduce also this impact of climate change, because in one hand, we would like to have the regenerative agriculture who will maintain the soil as it is today and try to limit the damages that we made during the years. On the other hand, we will try to keep the yields that we have today in order to preserve the food for the entire planet. And all in one, at the end of the day, I don't think that we cannot find solutions into, let's say, be safe on the same umbrella all the globe, not only regions from this world, or not only, let's say, USA or whatever, whichever country. We will like also, I use this opportunity to tell to Gerald also that he is welcome in Romania at the high level to discuss, because I'm also advisor for the government of Romania, in order to discuss if it's the case, some source of supply for the countries he mentioned before, because we have a lot of wheat, we search for destination, we are quite flexible, and also everybody could be happy at the end of the day. We could invite in the Ukrainian partners also here in Romania, in Bucharest, for having a much larger discussion on this aspect.
Thanks, Cezar. And a great introduction there for you, Gerald. Arnaud, tell me, has the industry kind of sleepwalked into this issue of climate change? I mean, there doesn't seem to have been massive preparation and planning for it, but it's absolutely happening.
I would say, on the contrary, I can tell you the industry and all the stakeholders within the grain value chain is making a tremendous development. We had speakers talking from input industry, providing now advice to farmers on how to improve the best practices, including new technologies for precise action on the field. Gerald could say, and also George could say about how traders are also using new technologies to optimize the trade. The matter is today is also how to optimize trade in terms of movement, because there is also CO2 emission via the trading. So all the grain value chain is moving on, and now we see in different parts of the world, Argentina having its carbon neutral system. Brazil now is looking to improve its productivity and improving also the carbon sequestration on soil. If you go in US, you have also soybean and maize producers which have a specific sustainable system, certification system. So you see indeed all the industry is moving. The matter here is sustainability has not necessarily taken in one definition. The rice producers, it's totally different story. So the next step, I would say, is how the market can work with this new approach in terms of sustainability, in terms of certifications, and avoiding that market start to be working less efficiently, because when the market work less efficiently, the prices are going up. And we know that when the prices are going up, it means that the poorest people will pay the bill. And that's something we have to avoid if we want to have a sustainable global food system.
Gerald, just come to you on prices going up. I've read that China is buying a lot of grain off the international market. What's behind that, and what's it doing to the price for everyone else?
Yeah, in the recent past, we've seen that skewed market flow, where as China buys quite a lot from the market, from the global market, that pushes up prices. And one of the commodities that has really seen a dramatic rise in price is soybeans, particularly the non-GMO soybeans. And I can even recall a year or two back when the Chinese got into the African market and started buying soybean from Malawi, from Tanzania, Uganda. Prices shot from an average of 55 Kenya shillings, around 55, 60, to 110 at market level.
So it doubled at market level?
It doubled.
Put that in pounds sterling or US dollars?
You're talking about half a pound or half a US dollar to about
a pound or a dollar?
A dollar, or just above a dollar.
So it doubled because the Chinese came in, they wanted soybeans.
And they wanted, so that's just one example of some of the crops that the Chinese are buying in good quantities, the soya, particularly the non-GMO soya. And also we've seen pulses, some of the pulses that the Chinese are buying, like green grams and pigeon peas. Because of them getting into the market again, the prices have shifted quite high. Happy for the consumer, yes. Sorry, for the farmer. But for local industries, local crushers, people who are processing soya and what have you, that price goes quite high. And the challenge we have is that in some jurisdictions, for example, like in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, we are not allowed to import GMO soya. So then that means the average price of feed has gone high, very, very high, as the price of soya has increased. And that therefore means you getting your eggs, getting your dairy, getting your other livestock production with the primary protein source of soya doubling in pricing is quite a serious issue that has affected us.
Thanks, Gerald. Yeah. Cezar, are you concerned about the Chinese coming in and buying up all these grains and soybeans and anything they can get their hands on?
Well, actually, everything it's about the Chinese walls that we all know. China is trying, it's a, let's say, opportunistic country. Every time China tried to buy cheapest as she could. And I would not disregard the fact that they try to get rid of the dependency by the USA on this environment. Of course, according to the, let's say, big let's say words speak by the BRICS, but we consider the following: China is an opportunistic buyer and always will buy where it's cheaper. We saw how many times they changed the focus from, let's say, from Brazil to Black Sea Basin, then back to USA, and so on. At the end of the day, this season, China will count on 100 million tons of wheat in production. They will overstep the 290 million tons of corn. Very good rains and very good crops they have on the horizon. And on soybeans, they will import at least 105 million tons. So they need sourcing in each and every corner from this world in order to carry about their own population at the end of the day. But I'm not concerned. Like that works China in every moment.
Cezar, Arnaud and Gerald, thank you all so much for your insight. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable TRT World. And if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.